We use, to me, an unparalleled network of team insiders that we have at 247sports.com. Think about it. Even right here, as we sit here now, there is somebody who is totally dialed in on Oklahoma State football. There are teams dialed in from Miami to Notre Dame to North Carolina, everywhere in between. And all we have to do is ring them up, give them a text, and we have immediate access inside, the best access that you could possibly have to college football teams. Think about how closed off you've been. You don't even have access to anything right now. So how are you supposed to know what's going on in camps? We're going to tell you. That's how. So at Notre Dame, really big news today, actually, the Notre Dame running back situation. Brian Kelly confirmed, first off, Kyron Williams is their first stringer right now. Now, there's been a lot of movement there. You remember they had a COVID outbreak, so there have been a lot of people who have and haven't been able to practice. Well, Kyron Williams right now emerges as the number one tailback for Notre Dame. More on that in just a second. But also, Osita Ekwonu. I wanted to memorize the name. I didn't want to read it. Osita Ekwonu, linebacker, okay? An outside edge rusher type. Brian Kelly just kind of reveals today, we're going to work him at running back too. Now, this guy played running back in high school. Those of you who follow Notre Dame recruiting, you know that. He is a load. He's the kind of guy who is built like an outside linebacker or maybe even an inside guy. Kind of like you looked at Derrick Henry when he was coming out of high school. A lot of people said, that guy can't play running back. Look how big he is. And oh my goodness, he's playing run. Did he just win the Heisman? Now, I'm not calling Heisman here. I'm not even calling starting reps. What I am saying is versatility, short yardage situations. You need someone to pound it in from the 2-yard line. You got options there. Now, what I also found very interesting from Brian Kelly today, he said a lot. If you guys are Notre Dame fans, I would suggest you go watch his press conference. But you know what he said today? He said, we've pretty much got our starters figured out. Now, he said, we got competition, yes, because every coach is just required to say that this time of year. But Brian Kelly, head coach at Notre Dame, said, we pretty much got our ones figured out. You don't hear that very often. I don't know whether to be excited about that or have a little trepidation about that, but hey, at least you know what you got, or apparently that Notre Dame coaching staff knows what they have. I want you to go back now to 2017. Do you remember the 2017 season? Colin and I were talking about it before the show. How well do you remember 2017? In some ways, it seems like yesterday. In other ways, it seems like a couple of decades ago. At Florida State, specifically, 2017 is the year where they opened against Alabama. It was like number 3 versus number 1. It was the first college football game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Yours truly was standing right there on the sideline. Late in the fourth quarter, DeAndre Francois goes down. I think it was Ronnie Harrison or somebody for Alabama who injures him, knocks him out for the season. And a kid by the name of James Blackman comes in. That's right. The same James Blackman that was named starting quarterback for Florida State today, that was also the guy who played quarterback for Florida State back then. Think with me what this guy's been through. He was there when Jimbo Fisher was still the head coach at Florida State in 2017. That was Fisher's last year. He was there and ended up getting the starting job after Francois goes down. He's there throughout the entire Willie Taggart debacle. It seems like he's been through half a dozen coordinators, and I think that number is kind of close to reality. And now Mike Norvell comes in. No spring, so another new offense. This guy probably knows half the offenses in college football by now. And Mike Norvell names him his starting quarterback. I tend to believe that out of all the offenses he's played in, and there have been a bunch of them, everything this side of the triple option, this is probably one that he's best suited to play in. Listen, there's not a whole lot of intel to be had here because there's not a whole lot to know about what Mike Norvell and Florida State are going to be able to do. But if there's a guy you want to root for in college football this year, if you want to see a guy who's overcome a whole lot of adversity, might I suggest James Blackman? Because that's a guy who's been through the ringer at Florida State. Didn't transfer either. Been there the whole time. Now let's get a little more in depth. Let's go to Tennessee. Tennessee is a team who has got a ridiculously tough schedule again this year. They also finished kind of hot last year, and then they won a bowl game, so they have some expectation. Third year under Jeremy Pruitt. Offensive line is now in a position where it's no longer this glaring weakness. It may even be a strength. May be one of the best in the country, for all we know. Sure would help to have Cade Mays eligible at at NCAA. But I'm of the opinion, and we're going to talk about this more in our Tennessee Grand season preview coming up in the next couple of weeks. Don't have a release date on that yet, but I'm of the opinion that if Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt are to shock the world this year, if they are to be one of the surprise teams in college football this year, they have to be the most physically dominant offensive team in the SEC. That's what their hallmark has to be this year. And I'll tell you what they really need. Aside from that offensive line and a couple of reliable tailbacks and consistency at quarterback, they need versatility and they need physicality at that tight end and H-back position. Blocking at those positions was pretty good last year. They had Dominic Wood-Anderson, who has since moved on to the NFL, and they had Austin Pope. Well, as I said, Wood-Anderson gone. Austin Pope had back surgery in the offseason, and so now you're looking at that position. It's overlooked. No one ever talks about H-back and tight end, but yet it's going to be a really, really integral part to what Tennessee's trying to do this year. So I was looking over on Vols 24/7 today, and they were talking about this, actually. They were kind of tossing some ideas back and forth. And, Princeton Fant, for example, is a name on that roster. He's going to play, very meaningful football for them this year. That's a guy in the past that was more a wide receiver that they have molded and tried to turn into a guy who fits this description. And hopefully for them it pays off. And hopefully Austin Pope is a guy that's good to go this year. I think it's a stretch to believe that they'll be in week one where they want to be at that position. But watch that. If you're watching stuff early in the year, Tennessee plays South Carolina in week one. Watch it. For all we know, they may beat Carolina, but still show red flags at a position like that. Or it may be that, they beat them 23-7, and it's not an offensive fireworks show, but yet you say, that's the style of football you'd want to see from them. That makes me think that no team's ever really going to run away from them this year because they're able to shorten games, shave off opponents' possessions. They can make it ugly if they need to. It's not exactly a vintage 2020 style offensively, but probably what they're going to need to be this year. At Texas A&M, we've got some loss and we've got some opportunity here. So Elijah Blades has opted out. Now, this is the second opt-out. I think they had one like in the last couple of hours, but Elijah Blades is a guy I really want to focus on because this is a guy who is going to be a starting corner for them, and he's opted out and said, I'm coming back next year. So this is a guy opting out because of COVID concerns, in other words. So who are our starters here at A&M at corner? Well, you got one in Miles Jones that is pretty entrenched at one of the starting positions. But now we enter into the equation potentially one of the guys we talked about a lot in the last recruiting cycle, and that's Jalen Jones. Jalen Jones is a guy for obvious reasons. All those 5 stars next to his name that a lot of Texas A&M fans have been really excited about. I'm excited about him. Everyone at 24/7 is excited about him. Probably going to get to see him play a lot as a true freshman. Well, you already were. Let me put it that way. Now you're probably going to get to see him start. And if he doesn't start, he's going to play a lot. And if he doesn't start, it'll be because that JUCO transfer, Brian George, is starting. George is like a more physically developed thumper type, but good athleticism now. But I'm really excited to watch Jalen Jones, and I think we're going to get to see him a lot this year at Texas A&M. Also, Colin, I didn't give you any elements for this, so don't worry about it. But did you see the news out of UCF today? Talked about 2017 earlier. 2017 lowercase national champ, UCF, had 10 guys opt out. A group opt out, like an entire wrestling stable. Just walk back through the curtain. They're not playing. Now, it wasn't necessarily marquee names that you would recognize, but if you're a UCF fan, you know some of these guys were going to start. Several of them were going to litter your two deep. So 10 guys just up and walk out on Central Florida today. That is enough to completely, potentially, upend a couple of games in the AAC this year. Cincinnati, they're watching. Memphis, they're watching. SMU, I think one of the biggest dark horse teams in college football this year, they're watching. So that's what's going on with camps right now.